Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote Podcast. Spring has sprung. It's starting to be summertime in Washington, D.C. That probably means it smells like warm, dead bodies in Sacramento, Mike Madrid, right?
You're brutal. Yeah, but yeah, you're probably a little accurate. Probably a little accurate. Like I say, you're not right.
Look, I went to Sacramento one time and saw like 3 homeless people. So that's all I talk about now about Sacramento. But when I went to Sacramento, I drove like 20 minutes south to go to a wedding and was in the nicest vineyard I never talk about that I've ever seen, Mike. So I digress some.
I'm going to have you back. I'm going to have you back because actually I've heard through the rumor mill, from a very good source, though, that the Latino caucus here in California wants to have us do a podcast and visit and talk with them. So nothing's set in stone yet, but I think we're going to have you out to visit, and we'll put on a new face for Sacramento. So I'll call the mayor and have the mayor out and roll out the red carpet for Chuck Rocha just so
have
he
him
can be
clean
a
up
better
those
ambassador.
homeless. Have them clean up those homeless encampments by the state capitol. But the one thing I do say about Sacramento, the nicest thing, and it is not Mike Madrid that was there, is the food scene there was really good. So I digress because the food was really good. Mike fed me and Ebony very well. Speaking
Sacramento,
Ebony,
come for the homeless and stay for the food.
That's it.
Chuck Rocha would say.
Bumper sticker. Bumper sticker. Me and Ebony were out there and we had some great food with Mike. Speaking of Ebony, for those of you who've been following me on social media and sending me direct messages asking if I'm okay, we and Ebony are good. We are just dealing with probably the ugliest local campaign that I have ever worked on. And I have worked on some ugly campaigns. And to be honest, I've been responsible for a lot of that ugliness. And Mike's laughing if you're watching the YouTube because he knows that that's true.
I knew where I was going, but yeah.
I am Dr. Evil when it comes to dirty campaigns, but never have I ever put a woman's safety I've never talked about somebody's family. Yeah. I've never put up like disgusting sexualized athletic pictures of them. And we have dealt with all the above. And for all of you junior novice strategists out there, if you will watch the Ebony Payne campaign over the last few weeks, you will have a master's class of how you take attacks and turn them back into something that rallies women to be around other women. 62% of the people that will vote in this primary are African-American women. And when you try to sexualize and misogynistically attack a Black woman over her looks, because she has an athletic career, you will see other Black women flock to her backing. So these folks who thought that they were trying to take down me and my soon-to-be wife's campaign have literally give us a shot of energy. But I've been actually putting things out on the Twitter that you've probably been reading so that the press would pick it up, so that if something stupid was to happen at a public forum or at something else where we've been getting lots of threatening phone calls and other things, that people will know that I've warned them and told them about it. But for those of you, I appreciate the calls and the text I've been getting. I'm used to running bare knuckles campaigns, but it's really different, Mike Madrid, when you're running a bare knuckle campaign and you have to go to bed every night with your candidate.
Yeah, especially when you love that candidate too. Right. And that's a personal focus on it too. First, I'm sorry that you're dealing with this. I saw some of the posts. I didn't realize how many and how ongoing it was. I thought it was just kind of a one-time event. This is an unfortunate part of where we've allowed the public square to devolve into. It's got to stop. Right. It's got to stop. It's not okay. It's like, oh, this is a new thing. This is the way it works. No, this has to stop. Hold. Period. End of story. Because
the police had to come to my house yesterday. The last time the police came to my house, they were coming to get me. Now, I had to call them to show up to file a complaint and be like, look, I know this is weird and I seem like I should be the villain here, but you need a list of this voicemail that some dummy was dumb enough to actually leave on my phone. And he was like, they left a message? I'm like, yeah, and their name. I was waiting for their address and their social security number.
Chuck's pissed when he's getting articulate and the words are getting longer and it's getting clearer and there's no bump.
You know how long I had to work on misogynistic?
I was going to say misogynistically. Pretty good.
I spelt it out frenetically. Did I say that part right? Frenetically. I think that's right.
Close enough. I mean, we know what you're talking. We know you're upset. We know you're concerned. And I'm sorry at a personal level and at a professional level. I too have seen, I've obviously not engaged in the way a lot of local campaigns have just devolved into violence, threats, violence. These are things that I never thought I would experience in politics in this country. It has been allowed to get to this point, and law enforcement is going to need to start taking this very, very seriously, because you can't wait too long to react to it. This is one of those situations where they've got to be proactive.
January 6th, there's a reason why, and you talk about this, Mike, why it happened, because they think that that's okay. That, the civil disobedience, and folks should have the right to certain civil disobedience, but you can't ransack the U.S. Capitol.
No.
You can't threaten a woman because she is fighting back against the system in Washington, D.C., right? Like the amount and the level of where the last time I ran a local campaign of just like the hate and physical threat.
Yeah.
Sure, we would do ugly mail pieces and talk about somebody's criminal record or their dog or they have back child support. Like we've all made those ads. And that's fair game because it's public record.
Right.
But the other things now, and I think it has a lot to do, and I didn't even think about this, Mike, till you brought it up, but the public square has changed. We think it's socially acceptable to talk about a woman's appearance, as part of a campaign because she's an athlete. You sexualize that. Like, anyway, I digress. I will show you something that'll make you laugh, though, Mike. What I do when I'm upset, instead of going and whooping somebody's ass, which is really what I want to do, is these are sticky notes. And I have a Sharpie here, like an old school Sharpie and sticky notes. And I've been writing one after another, mail your ballot back today, Ebony Payne. Mail your ballot back today. I'm literally going to walk around after this show today and put door hangers on doors with sticky notes that I wrote that says, send your ballot back today because ballots dropped yesterday.
I like that. And it's better than responding in kind, because I think the natural inclination is for us to do that. And somewhere, I think we can pinpoint roughly the date, roughly the year of when the violence and the outrage that is inappropriate was encouraged by political leaders. This seeps into the vernacular. What's that, Chuck? Into the vernacular of the electorate, and people started listening to that, and it's real and it's serious, and that's why, the January 6th stuff that Trump is now basically saying we're going to let you off. He's saying we'll do a blanket pardon if I get reelected now. All of this is encouraging violence. And for some, that's the point, that's the end goal, but we've got to be better than that. We can't allow that to happen. So I'm really, really sorry for what's going on there.
Speaking of violence, for those of you who also were following my Twitter, you may have noticed, and I'm a little disappointed Mike didn't call and have me do a live stream, but I was at the White House, baby, on Monday for 6 de Mayo. On Monday for 6 de Mayo.
Cinco Drinko, as it's oftentimes referred to as, or Cinco de Trio, as Politico phrased it as, with
there was a scathing little report they put out.
There's overemphasis of the White House. They call it an overemphasis, desperately trying to show everything they possibly can for this Latino vote. But Chuck, you were there. Give us a report on the ground. How'd it go? Talk to me about it.
Let me tell you about the margaritas. The margaritas was a flowing. And I know the White House and I appreciate what they did. And for all of you out there, like there's no perfect party or not a party or whatever. Is it pandering? Is it not? You can debate that with Mike Madrid. I'm not. But if they hadn't had a party, that's what we would have been writing about 2 days later, because I want you to know some of the best parties I ever went to at the White House were hosted by one Barack Obama. And those some bitches was good, like big, lots of food, lots of drink. Let's live it up, boys. This one was in the Rose Garden. I'd never been in the Rose Garden. I got to see the rose plant that they had actually planted in honor of Cesar Chavez, which I thought was really cool, with a picture of the First Lady and Julie there. But it was good. It was a who's who. I think the thing that I noticed the most is that, and it's not just with this party, and I'm really honored that I make light of it too much, but I'm happy that they included me. I enjoyed going. It was good to see everybody. I worked for many of these folks that were there, for the majority of them. And to see what they're doing, not just with some stupid 6 de Mayo party, which was cool and the president was great, but the early spin, what me and Mike were talking about off air before we started, we're seeing things differently. Me and Mike Madrid have been screaming from the mountaintops for years about, you should prioritize our community. You should start talking to us earlier. You should start pandering to us like you pander to white women in the suburbs. Well, lo and behold, and it's still not perfect or even, satisfactory yet, but I do see things changing. I see more money being spent. He knows, the president of the United States knows he has a problem with Latinos. The Democratic Party knows that. The Republican Party may or may not know that, or may not know they have an opportunity, but I do see things changing. And there was an energy out there that, I don't think it is any recourse on elections, Mike, but I was honored to be there.
Yeah, well, and they're focused on it. That's point number one. And that is important. Because, and look, it's also like you said, this is not just Cinco de Mayo. It wasn't just a party at the White House, although that's a part of it.
Sure.
I'm going to give the Biden folks credit. They have been running ads at a historically early margin, time of year, a time in the cycle. They are doing the things that they need to do. And I am grateful because as somebody who has been worried about democracy, has been worried about the state of the country, and has been calling this out, there have been people in the campaign who have been saying this is not a problem. And I'm glad that those people have been sidelined, because I think they have been.
The thing that I noticed the most, Mike, let me interrupt you because I think you may add what you're saying, is there were a few other folks who early on in this administration, like me, had been critical, who did not get invited to the White House in the first 2 years. Let's just say there were some of us walking around and we would see each other, like we both knew we both was our first time there in many years, and we just see each other and we both were thinking, what the hell are you doing here? And I'm like, what the hell are you doing here? And then we both talk to each other and be like, how did we both get in here? And we would have a funny laugh. And I'm not saying that happened with one person, Mike Madrid, but it probably happened with 5. When I saw, what's our poster buddy's name? Armandi from Florida?
Fernand Armandi.
He walked in with me and I said, how the hell did you get in here? And he looked at me and he said, how the hell did you get in here?
I love Fernand. We got to have Fernand on the show. Fernand's one of the better Latino pollsters in Florida. We've done a lot of work. We've done work together. We've done panels together. Has made the terrible mistake of being honest in order to warn the party that there's problems, there's issues. And as Mike Madrid will tell you from personal experience, you start saying that, you're going to get your head cut off, because people would much rather be wrong and lose and keep their contract and titles and roles than say that you're right and make the adjustments that they need to and allow somebody else to get credit or whatever they're afraid of. That's just politics. But again, bottom line is the White House is treating this differently, and I do want to give them credit. Now, we're going to talk a lot because, as you know, I've been very critical, and I think accurately, and I will continue to be the most accurate voice on the Latino vote that you can hear out there. That they don't have a message that's working. That they don't really understand at the way the size and the scope of the problem. But credits to them. There has been an acknowledgement. You cannot fix a problem until you first acknowledge it. And it seems that the Biden campaign has at least turned that corner. And I guess we'll just for historical purposes, it will be Cinco de Mayo 2024 when the Biden campaign finally made the freaking pivot. So congratulations.
I think I'm not going to be obviously as hard as Mike is. The thing that I appreciate about what they have done, this has nothing to do with Cinco de Mayo. Again, I'm glad I get to go to the party. But, I got to see Latino consultants there that are working there. I got to see the manager who was there. I got to see other people that were there that I know are good as consultant as I am. And, I think highly of myself. So I can't legitimately sit around here and not give credit when I've bitched for 20 years about not having Latino consultants and not having Latino managers and not having things to represent our community. Again, I take some of what Mike says about, like, can they do it better? Did they have a better message? Me and Mike can debate that between each other on this thing from now to Election Day, but I'm going to give them credit is that they're starting earlier. If you said, Chuck, what would you have them do? I was like, start early. They're doing early. Hire Latino consultants. They have hired some of the best Latino consultants. Adrian Saenz, Colin Rogero, the team over there are, bar none, some of the best in the business. And I look forward to critiquing what they do, lifting up what they're doing, debating with ugly ass Mike Madrid, where we're going to debate or disagree on this. But let's pivot from that to Mike. It seemed like there was an election this week in the cornfields of Indiana, and something there caught your attention that you mentioned to me before we were on air. And I thought maybe something to talk about there. You're starting to see a pattern across the country.
Yeah, and this is not specific to the Latino vote. I haven't looked at Latino numbers yet in Indiana, but I'm glad that we're at a point now in our lives and careers where that is actually a thing. But Nikki Haley and the candidacy, I want to talk about Haley a little bit and what that means. But Nikki Haley pulled 21% of the Republican primary vote 5 weeks after she dropped out of the race. And the continuing problems of Donald Trump with the Republican base is it's out there. It's underreported as to why. And I think it's important that we start to dissect why, because the question as to who wins this campaign is a presidential campaign is ultimately going to be decided by whether or not that Republican base sticks with him or not when things come to a head in November. So let me make this observation. Her vote share is growing, by the way, since she dropped out. She's gone from 11 to 12 to 15 to 16 to now 21. And Indiana is a Republican state. This is a conservative a state as they come. And the reason, if 20% of these Republicans are defecting, Mike Madrid, then why is Trump doing so well in the polling averages? Well, first, what I would suggest is most of this vote is going to come back. I've always said that. But even if 50, 60, 70% of it comes back, Donald Trump is still in trouble. Remember, Donald Trump lost 8% of the Republican base to Joe Biden in 2020, and he lost. He lost close, but he lost. And he's sitting at 3 times that right now. Now, again, long way to election. It's a safe way to send a message. This is not a pro-Nikki Haley vote, okay? Let's make that really clear. This is an anti-Trump vote, and that's more important, I think, for the discussion that we're having. So keep your eye on that Nikki Haley level as we get closer and closer to convention, which is close. We're about done here. But the closer we get and the bigger her number gets, the more it's saying that Republicans are disaffected in a way, and here's the pivot point, in a way that is foundationally different than the disaffection you're seeing with Joe Biden. Okay? Biden's polling is showing some significant weaknesses. We've talked about that. But his electoral results are not showing that. He hasn't lost 20% of the vote to Dean Phillips or Marianne Williamson or to none of the above. Okay. That's the exact opposite of what Trump is facing. Trump is polling 95% lock on the Republican base, but the actual election results are showing him upwards of 20, losing that base vote. Biden is showing hemorrhaging amongst his base voters, especially young voters, Latino voters, and a small share of African-American voters. But on election day, that seems to disappear. That's something that I'm watching when it comes to the Latino vote. Okay. Because the only reason this race is as competitive as it is, with Trump losing the Republican share that he is for the moment, this significant shift that of Latinos moving to the Republican Party. We can argue whether it's true or not. But the fact that it's sitting in the mid-40s range amongst virtually every poll out there now is a sign that the shift has happened, and it's happening. And it's not whether or not it's happening, it's how big. And it would be a shame of shames and ironies of ironies if Donald Trump wins this campaign with a historically high level of support with Latinos, of all people, because it was us who was attacked first. And I always remind people this. I write this in my book. There's that book plug, Chuck. Latino Century, Mike Madrid, by Simon & Schuster. Order now. Order a couple copies, you and your friends. But what I point out is Donald Trump may have offended everybody in this country, and he pretty much has, but he started first by attacking the Mexicans. That's how he started the campaign. And that is something that should never, ever be lost on us. I get people were upset with grab him by the pussy. I get that people were pissed when, John McCain is the moment that he should have been disqualified as president. Bullshit. The moment he should have been disqualified was the moment he came down and started attacking Mexicans.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime.
They're rapists.
All the things.
Yeah, all the things.
Mike, I think that you're onto something there. Did you finish your thought?
Yeah, I'm done.
Let's stay in Indiana. I want to bring a flag to something else in Indiana. And this is what you get here on the Latino Vote Podcast, is a plethora of information about these Midwestern states and the impact. Man, I got the words today. The impact that they are having, our vote is having all across the country. Mike Madrid won't know this. This is what makes me giddy and happy, because I get to talk about things that he don't know about, is that the largest concentration of Latinos in the state of Indiana is in a place called Gary. And Gary is in the northwest corner. Think of it as South Chicago, because it's literally South Chicago. And it's right next to the Great Lakes. And you know what's right next to those Great Lakes and what Gary, Indiana is known for, other than amazing taquerias, is the steel industry. Bethlehem Steel, U.S. Steel. All of these steel mills were along the Great Lakes. And for all of you folks out there who love history, it's because the iron ore was in northern Minnesota, and we would send it down the Great Lakes, and they would bring it by boat to the steel mills that would take iron ore and turn it into some of the strongest U.S. steel we'd ever made, and literally built America. Well, back in the 50s and the 60s, lots of black folks and lots of Mexicans from Texas moved to Chicago and Gary to work where there was these amazing jobs in these steel mills. So now there's second and third generation Latinos, and the mayor of Gary is Latino. The sheriff of Lake County is Latino. And so I tell you that to tell you this. This is like we talked about last week. I tickle myself because I say all this shit, then I find something I won't say. But what the point of that is that there's a congressional district there that used to be a D+30 district because it was blue collar, steel workers. You know who's from Gary, Indiana? Michael Jackson and the Jackson family are from Gary, Indiana. So black people, brown people, and white working class steel workers, but all of these are non-college educated voters. A D+20 for a guy named Pete Wiskowski. You know, this Polish guy, you know, all of these immigrants that live there, and they love that guy. He was literally a god. Well, now, Mike, he retired, and the Indiana legislature redrew that seat after the last redistricting and had to add, because people have moved out of Gary, they've had to spread out into the more rural areas, which are way more red. And so now it's a D+5 district. Pretty safe. Most D+5 districts are very safe, or not very, but they're more safe than a swing district. But guess what? The black folks and the Latino folks who live there haven't heard from Joe Biden. They haven't heard from Donald Trump. There's nobody talking to these folks. So this is one of those districts that are a top target for Democrats to have to protect. And if you see on election day, us losing Indiana 1 in the middle of the state when the polls close there at like 7 p.m., it's going to be a bad night. And here's the kicker. 25% of the electorate there, Mike, is Latinos. Working class, blue collar Latinos. Now I'm working on this race on the IE side for a large independent expenditure. They brought me in, a Latino consultant, to work with other consultants to do the Spanish language and bilingual communications, because it's important for the House leadership is the PAC I'm working for. But it tells you this story that we've been telling folks about how Latino voters are going to determine who controls not just the White House, but the House of Representatives. This is one of those marginal seats that if we lose a D+5 seat, we're going to have a bad night. And if it's because of brown and black voters, it's going to be even worse, not to what you just said.
I don't know what happened today, but when you start to sound professorial, when you start to have the history of the country and international trade as the basis for your independent expenditure work.
As soon as I broke out the boats coming from Minnesota.
Yeah, so gee, Chuck Rocha's doing his work here. How the hell does Chuck know about Gary, Indiana? But here it is.
Because I was a steel worker. Remember, I was the political director.
Not only are you a steel worker, but you're obviously know something about the Latino vote, and you're working on an IE in this campaign. So we're going to put a pin in this race, because if anybody's perfectly made to talk to these voters, it's Chuck Rocha. So let's they hired the right guy, and I just want to hear the unfoldings of this race and the dynamics there, because I think that was an excellent setup and a great way to talk about what the party's doing in a contestable race like this. D+5 is good, but it ain't great. Like you said, this is you got to invest, you got to run a real campaign, and you're paying attention to the changing demographics. Good stuff. We're going
to talk a lot about races that Mike know a lot about in California. 22, 27, 45. Oh, and the one he loves was at 13, where Gray's coming back, like he talks about Duarte. All four of those are big, big races in California. Excuse me. But there's some big races in New York. I've got a list over here on my wall. New York 4, 19, 22, 23. These 8 seats in California and New York are going to have a big play. A lot of them have lots of Latinos in them. Those California races, many of them are majority Latinos. Yeah. And we're going to have lots of podcasts where we talk about the dynamics of New York here and California here are going to have on this race. But it's these little races in the middle of the country. It's this Indiana 1. It's a Nebraska seat, Mike, where there's a guy named Vargas, Tony Vargas, running for Congress in Nebraska 2. against Don Bacon in an R+1 seat. Like, what happens there with the Latino vote in Lincoln, Nebraska, for a guy named Tony Vargas, who I should say is a sitting state senator, running against a guy, Bacon, who is way more conservative than the moderate. And Mike would tell you, as far as electoral college goes, man, I'm professorial. Electoral college goes, this is where the one electoral vote comes from in that state where it's divided in two, right?
Yeah, that one electoral vote that everybody's looking at that could be to determine who the president of the United States is in that congressional district.
And the point that Mike is trying to make is that in a scenario where Joe Biden wins Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, but loses Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, guess how many electoral votes he needs to add to those three Midwestern states to get to 270? One vote. So there could be a scenario, and the state legislature in Nebraska know this, are trying to pass a law right now to make it be a winner take all state, even though it's been split for I don't know how long, Mike. You
since the 70s,
wow.
1970s. Yeah, there was a movement actually to split congressional districts. It's a great story because Maine does the same thing. Maine is the only other state
that's right
where there is congressional representation. So in Maine and Nebraska, there are these two outliers where they elect their electoral votes are sent by the candidate who wins that congressional district, not the state. And in the 1970s, there was this very slow quasi-emergent movement to do this. Great woman, state senator, Republican in Nebraska, went to a U.S. conference of state legislators, met somebody from Maine. They were having drinks and decided they were going to do this. They got this done in both of their states, but then the movement sort of died. But that's the legacy of this kind of conference, random meeting between these two state senators at this legislative meeting, and it could well determine the outcome of the presidential campaign with these one congressional district votes.
Did you know in the state of Nebraska that they have one state body? They don't have two.
Unicameral legislature.
Right. Yeah. I think they call it a Senate, right?
Yeah. It's only one. That's the only house. Only state with one house.
Yeah. For those rednecks watching, listening to this thing, that means there's no state house and state Senate. No, it's all done through one group of votes, and they have all the power. And they're not bipartisan. I mean, they don't run as no party in that unicameral.
No, it's partisan.
It's partisan.
Yeah.
You run as a Democrat or a Republican.
Yeah.
It's really interesting as you watch this and figure out like what's happening. The Latino vote finds its way and Latino voters into all these conversations. Mm-hmm. This Nebraska 2, this Indiana 1, and y'all, it's just going to get more and more as our population grows. I was re-listening to the great podcast we had last weekend with our brother Lopez from the Pew Institute, Mark
Hugo Lopez.
Mark Hugo Lopez. And he was, I like to go back and I get so caught up in it and I'm playing around with Mike that I got to go back and listen and re-listen to these podcasts, and he was saying some things that were very interesting about the third generation Latinos now being the majority. And it's very personal for me because I'm that person, right? And as those folks come of age, it's changing the demographic and we're growing outside of those urban centers.
Yes.
What Michael Madrid's kind of been saying.
Yes. We didn't need Mark on this. I'm glad we did. I love Mark. I think it's the best speech in America. But that's exactly right. That's why we're at where we are at right now is the demographic.
Is it the part? Let me interrupt. Mike, Is it the part about the foreign born first versus the native born? Or is it something else?
Yeah. No, that's exactly what it is. Okay. Except now it's like what you're finding. Or when the Rocha boys, your kids are fourth generation now, right? Your son.
The Rocha boys are fifth.
The Rocha boys are fifth, but your son is the fourth in between there, who's over 18, I'm imagining, who can vote.
He is 33 years old, sure.
Okay, so there you go. Like that, there are no polls that are looking at fourth generation Latinos yet. But that's my point is 20 years ago, everybody looked at the demographic at the Latino vote and was like, oh, it's an immigrant vote. It's a foreign-born vote. It's a Spanish language vote. It's a poor, non-educated, working class, working poor vote. And they're still running campaigns based off of that. The inflection point, what Mike Madrid's been saying for 8-10 years now, has been like, it's changing, it's moving. And it has been. And now everybody's going, oh, wait a second. The third generation is way bigger. And they're removed from the immigrant experience. And they don't speak Spanish.
Right.
In most cases, by the third generation at all. Okay. So it's not like they choose to speak in English. They don't speak Spanish at all. Okay. And that is, as Mark just pointed out, that's where this explosive growth is happening. And it's why I would argue, I'll be a little bit partisan here, it's why I don't think the Democratic consultants understand this, is because for 30 years, they have been going in the other direction. They have been doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on it's in Spanish and it's immigration and it's the Republicans are racists. And they're losing Latinos who are like, I think border security is okay. Like, we need that. And I don't watch Univision and I don't listen in Spanish. And you're calling me racist because I think we need border security? Like, that doesn't add up. And it's not that they're anti-Democrat. It's just that they're not as anti-Republican as Democrats think they, quote unquote, naturally should be. And remember, folks, this isn't a small sliver anymore. This, as Mark Lopez pointed out, Madrid's been saying it, but he's this Republican crazy, so don't listen to him. Let's listen to Mark Lopez, the gold standard of Latino polling. And what he says is, yeah, it's a huge number. It's a huge number. And that, more than anything else, explains this transition time that we're in as a community. I'm excited about it because I've seen both parties struggle with it. They're just figuring out what it means. Some of them are going to still be having, Cinco de Mayo events and thinking it's all in Spanish, and that's great. At least they're paying attention now. But what it really signals is a heralding of a new era, and I'm going to put it that epically for both parties to get their shit together.
Means. I'm not sure what the heralding means, but this is what I know is that I'm now getting to sit in meetings and be around consultants who are looking at this differently than I saw people do 20 years ago. Mike Madrid don't get to see it. And I may not get to see it if it don't come to, my word is fruition. There is now Latinos at the table when lots of these big IEs that are running for these House races. And from the initial work that I've been seeing a lot of them doing, they are doing the old way. Things are changing. It's not just Spanish language. It's not just immigration. We're talking about working class, this and that. And now we know, because I'm in charge of lots of this stuff, of that Latinos are for border security, and they do want to talk about it. So I think things are changing. I'm going to give the Democrats and the consultants more credit because I've never seen things change more dramatically than they have in the last 5 years. And that's because you saw what happened with Donald Trump in 2016. It scared the shit out of a lot of Democrats and Democratic consultants. And now there's a lot more emphasis, a lot more cultural competency, a lot more consultants. Like, it makes me really proud to see what I'm starting to see in a lot of these bigger groups that are spending money. Now, whether they'll mess up the messaging at the end, they still might, but just like Republicans may step on themselves at the end, but I do see things moving in the right direction. And to my son, who has two beautiful kids, and we talk about this on this program, the Rocha Boys, you go to those boys today and you go, what's the name of your daddy's daddy? Me. They'll be abuelo. Like, they don't know my name is Chuck or Charles. They think my name is abuelo. And I've done that since the moment they hit the ground, because I wanted those little white boys who are just as white as the day is long, whose last name is Rocha, just like mine, to know and have some connection to our culture. And it's important to me. Now, I don't know if I'm an exception to the rule, if everybody's doing that. I just knew that these little boys, to Mike Madrid's point, are to grow up without a Latino around them in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They don't have one Latino friend. They got a bunch of little black friends. They have a bunch of little white friends. And they're in a working class, middle class. My son is a union welder for the Steamfitters Union. He is me made over again. And those boys don't know they're Mexican. Like, my son does a pretty good job, and now he knows, but it's not part of the culture, to Mike's point, because they're growing up in Pittsburgh there's not a taqueria around them. They may go to some burrito place and get a burrito, and they love doing that, but that's the closest thing they have to our culture, Mike. I think you've probably seen it too.
Yeah, I wrote a book about it.
The whole century, maybe?
Yeah, the whole century. That's the future. That's what's coming. That's what we're excited about. And I also don't want to be dismissive to efforts in Spanish. They are important. But they're not the most important. Okay, the way you talk to Latino voters increasingly is going to be in English. It doesn't mean you dismiss this experience.
That's true.
It doesn't mean you advocate for quote unquote assimilation. I'm not making that
both,
argument.
right? You got to do both.
You have to do
all
both, and you should. And that's what's unique about this. Is everyone's like, oh, you're just like the Irish or the Greeks or the Jews or the Poles 100 years ago. No, this is different. It's bigger. One, it's closer to the country of origin. Two, there's a seamlessness where a lot of us, and our families go home for parts of the year. And there's a continual, reinforcement. Immigration is still occurring. So this is different. It is not. We are not the stereotypical caricature that I think Democrats want to make us out to be, but we are also not just like everybody else, like the Republicans want to make us out to be. That's my message, is you're both a little bit right, but you're both a lot wrong. And if you all just shut up, I'm using y'all. What happened? I'm like the guy from Rio Grande Valley, and you're the professor today.
Get in here.
I'm dropping a y'all. If y'all would just listen up here and stop the nonsense and realize that this electorate is emerging as something completely and entirely different. And to those Latino consultants on both sides, drop the bullshit. What you were doing doesn't work. And that's okay, because the problem's still there to be fixed. But acknowledge the change that has happened, lean into it, and start having some real better ideas on how to fix it. Stop with it's not happening. Stop with this bullshit that, your polling is somehow better when your polling is garbage. Okay? Stop it. You owe it to the community. You don't even owe it to your party. You don't even owe it to your career. You owe it to your community. So I was all happy and go lucky and listened to all of this podcast. I've got a little bit hopped up again, Chuck. So bring me back and bring us home, because we got to stop before I get too angry.
We're going to call this Two Angry Mexicans. It's a new name of our podcast. Please tune in to Two Angry Mexicans here, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, both representing the bald-headed diaspora of our community. Look, thanks for listening to the Latino Vote Podcast this week. You need to get on the Twitters. You need to get on the Instagrams. You need to get on all the things where you do the reviews. Now, the reviews actually happen on Apple Podcasts. They happen on the Amazons. Don't forget to look up Mike Madrid's new book, The Latino Century. Buy it at all the major outlets where you can get it on Amazon, buy it online. He's barely making it over there in Sacramento. He needs to buy some more steel bars for his front door. So buy some books. Until next week, me and Mike will see you again.